Her phone was upside down on the table, screen up, perfectly centered, not charging and still warm. That alone wouldn't have meant anything, if not for the fact she never left it behind. She could forget her wallet, her keys, even her shoes, but never that phone, her glowing little portal of validation and secrets. I stared at it like it had teeth, then tapped the screen and watched the lock screen light up with a paused text bubble. Can't wait to taste you again, face-blowing kiss. That bubble blinked and disappeared before the message came through, like the sender changed their mind or realized they just handed me a loaded gun. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't breathe heavy or curse under my breath. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat across from that blinking, traitorous rectangle like I was watching a wounded animal bleed out. The silence in the house wasn't peace, it was anesthetic. The kind you get before a surgery you're pretending won't happen. Everything about that morning had been too precise. She'd kissed me longer than usual, left the house with a breezy, "love you," that didn't quite land, and most of all, she didn't take the phone. I didn't need to know what the rest of that message said. I didn't need proof, not yet. Suspicion doesn't scream. It whispers in between familiar details that suddenly don't fit. So I played dumb. Texted her from my own phone like nothing was wrong. "Hey babe, you left your phone. Want me to bring it to work?" The 3 gray dots of her reply popped up immediately, then vanished, then came back, then vanished again, like her entire nervous system was debating which lie to use. Finally, "Oh, I didn't even notice. Don't worry, I'll grab it at lunch." No panic, no surprise, no, "Wait, what?" Just smooth, sugar-coated bullshit, like it had been rehearsed. That's when I knew. She wasn't just cheating. She was good at it. And that didn't scare me. That excited me. Because if she thought she was in control, then she was already standing in the trap. I just had to decide when to snap it shut. I didn't storm out or cry or spiral into insecurity. I did what every man should do when he smells betrayal. I made a list. Not of suspects. Of tactics. Psychological ones. I didn't want revenge that burned fast and loud. I wanted something that simmered beneath the surface and turned her world to ash from the inside. So I spent the rest of the morning studying her behavior like a scientist watching a lab rat. Did she smile too much? Laugh too loud? Did her eyes twitch when I touched her? That night, when she came home and reached for her phone, I was already standing there with it, unlocked, screen glowing. I disabled Face ID while she was in the shower a week ago. She hadn't noticed. "Someone named Michael really wants to see you again," I said casually, tossing it to her like it was a piece of trash. She caught it, fumbled with her words, mumbled something about a coworker and an inside joke. I just nodded. "Cool," I said, and kissed her on the forehead. That's when the game began. Not my game, hers. I just made sure the rules changed without telling her. I started giving her little instructions. Small things, like, wear that black dress tonight, or smile when you walk into the room. It lights you up. She thought I was reconnecting, trying to reignite the flame. She didn't realize I was rewiring her responses like a puppet on new strings. I watched her follow each command with an obedient gleam in her eye, mistaking manipulation for intimacy. And every time she complied, I gave her a little smile, not love, not warmth, approval. Like a teacher patting a student on the head. The more I praised her, the more she sought it. I matched it with cold precision, never too cold to raise alarms, just enough to make her feel like she was chasing something that used to be hers. When she tried to lead, I pulled away. When she pulled away, I leaned in. I was no longer her husband. I was her mirror, showing her only what I wanted her to see. A woman who cheated but still wanted to be adored. A woman who was slowly realizing the pedestal had turned into a cage. I didn't confront her again. I didn't need to. The fear of what I might know was more corrosive than any truth I could say aloud. And every time she smiled at me across the dinner table, not knowing if I looked through her photos or if the neighbor just happened to mention seeing her out during lunch, I watched a little more of her crumble. Not with fire. With silence. That's how you break a liar. Not by catching them red-handed. By letting them wonder if you already have. I used to think we were one of the lucky ones, the kind of couple people envy in passing glances at restaurants or envy in silence when scrolling through our vacation photos. We laughed easily, touched often, fell asleep with our legs tangled like the world couldn't reach us in the dark. I supported her through every late-night breakdown, every career shift, every crisis of confidence. She dressed up as figuring herself out. She'd cry into my chest about imposter syndrome, about hating her job, about wanting more from life, and I'd hold her, whispering that she could be anything, do anything. I meant it. I meant every goddamn word. And for a while, she seemed to believe me. Then came the shift, not like a car crash, not loud or obvious, but like a slow leak you don't hear until the engine fails. It started when she began reading books about boundaries, using words like self-actualization and emotional labor in everyday conversation like they were seasoning she had just discovered. At first, I was proud she was finding her voice, building confidence. But slowly, her growth began to leave less and less space for me. I'd ask how her day was and get it clipped. It's hard to explain. I'd reach for her hand during a movie and find it suddenly too busy scrolling through her phone. Our shared playlists were replaced by her Bluetooth automatically connecting to some podcast with a woman talking about how men are anchors that keep women from flying. It was supposed to be empowering. Instead, it felt like a countdown I wasn't included in. She started going out more, not irresponsibly, not at all hours, just strategically. After-work drinks with people I'd never heard of. Spontaneous yoga retreats that she couldn't quite explain. Weekend art classes she signed up for last minute and came home from with pain on her hands and someone else's cologne in her hair, just faint enough that I questioned if I imagined it. She smiled when she walked in, but it wasn't the same smile. It had become polite, like she was being friendly to a neighbor she no longer trusted. And always that phrase, I just need a little more space. That one hit like frostbite, quiet, numb, and irreversible. Her phone, once left face up without a thought, started living in her back pocket or upside down on silent. Her social media, once a canvas of couple photos and shared memories, was wiped clean, set to private, like I was a stranger she didn't want watching. I asked her once, just once, if everything was okay. She gave me a smile like a dagger dipped in sugar and said, "Of course, babe." Why wouldn't it be? I clung to that word, babe, like it still meant something. But even the way she said it felt hollow. She didn't call me that in bed anymore. Hell, she didn't really look at me in bed anymore. She looked through me, eyes focused on some faraway place I couldn't reach. One night, I borrowed her car to grab groceries because mine was low on gas. In the back seat, half hidden under a yoga mat, was a receipt from a high-end restaurant downtown. 2 entrees. 1 bottle of wine. A date we hadn't had. A night she said she'd spent journaling at a friend's. I stared at it for a long time, then folded it neatly and slid it into my wallet. Not for confrontation. For confirmation. I was still clinging to the illusion then, hoping maybe she had some innocent explanation I could force myself to believe. I wasn't ready to be right. I wanted to stay wrong. I wanted to believe that love was a force strong enough to survive reinvention, even if she was reinventing herself without me. But the cracks kept widening. She stopped laughing at my jokes. She started criticizing things she used to love, my cooking, my taste in music, even the way I held her. "You don't really listen, do you?" She snapped one morning while I made us coffee. No warning, no context. Just a whip crack out of nowhere. I stood there with 2 mugs in my hand and realized she didn't see me anymore. Not really. I had become a placeholder. A background prop in the stage play of her newfound independence. The kind of independence that looked a lot like escapism dressed in self-help buzzwords. But I still didn't accuse her. Not yet. Because part of me needed more than suspicion. I needed clarity. I needed the exact moment when I could look at her and know this was when she stopped being mine. That moment was coming. I could feel it in the coldness of her kisses, the sterile way she said good night, the long, silent drives home from places she wouldn't name. She'd say she needed time with her thoughts, but when I asked her what she was thinking, she'd shrug and say, "Nothing, really." And that was the scariest part. Not that she was hiding something, but that she might be feeling nothing at all. It was the earrings that broke me. Not shouting, not messages, not lipstick on a collar or a stranger's cologne, just those tiny, stupid, golden hoops lying on the bathroom counter, glittering like the last breath of a dying animal. I had bought them for her birthday last year, expensive but simple, something elegant she could wear every day, and she did, until she lost them during a trip to visit her sister. She was upset about it for days, almost theatrically so, sighing into her coffee, muttering, "I really loved those," like the universe had stolen something sacred from her. But that morning, while brushing my teeth, I opened the mirrored cabinet and saw them, tucked into the back corner, behind the Tylenol and a half-used tube of lipstick, hidden like a secret too small to notice. Except I did notice. I stared at them like they were bleeding. My toothbrush hung from my mouth like an afterthought while my mind ran calculations faster than I could breathe. She didn't lose them. She just didn't want to wear them around me anymore. Why? Who did she save them for? Whose bed did she leave them in and then retrieve like a thief returning to the scene of the crime? My body didn't move, but my blood turned to ice. I didn't rage. I didn't storm into the bedroom demanding answers. I simply closed the mirror and looked at my reflection, then past it, through it, into a version of myself I hadn't met before. A man who wasn't angry, just awake. I watched her that morning like a hunter studying the prey that thinks it's safe. She walked into the kitchen in yoga pants and a loose shirt that wasn't hers, hair tied up, humming some song I didn't recognize. When she kissed my cheek and said, "Morning, love," it landed like a ghost brushing past my skin. I nodded, handed her coffee, and smiled with just enough curve to seem real. She never noticed the shift in me. That was the most insulting part, how easy it was for her to keep acting like we were still okay, like her betrayal was just another item she kept in the back of the cabinet, hoping I'd never look too closely. She took the earrings later that afternoon. I watched her slip them into her bag when she thought I wasn't paying attention. That meant she was going to see him, whoever he was. I didn't need a name. I didn't need a face. I just needed that movement, the soft, careful way she picked up the jewelry she lost a year ago and smiled to herself, thinking I was too blind to understand the language of liars. I didn't say a word, didn't ask where she was going. I just kissed her forehead and said, "Be safe," like I was sending a soldier into battle. But really, I was watching a traitor leave the walls. She left her iPad open on the couch. Normally, she guarded her devices like state secrets, but today she was sloppy. Comfortable. That was her mistake. I didn't snoop. I didn't need to. The notification appeared on its own. A calendar alert. Drinks with M at Haven, 7 p.m. I Googled the place. A bar downtown. Intimate. Stylish. Definitely not somewhere you go to catch up with a coworker. She told me she had a late meeting at the office and not to wait up. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply sat back into the couch, felt the weight of the silence surround me, and let my mind begin to sharpen. That was the moment. Not when I saw the earrings. Not when she lied again. But right there, when I realized I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't sad. I was done. Everything inside me hardened into a cold, strategic clarity. She was gone. The woman I loved had been gone for a long time. I'd been mourning a ghost, feeding it, sleeping beside it, kissing it goodnight while it whispered someone else's name in its sleep. I watched the minutes tick by on the clock like a countdown. Not to her betrayal. That had already happened. I was counting down to mine. When she came home past midnight smelling of wine and someone else's skin, I was already in bed, pretending to sleep. She slid in beside me quietly, like shame wrapped in silk sheets, and touched my back like nothing had changed. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I just let her fingers rest there, like a mosquito deciding where to bite, and made a decision. Tomorrow, the game begins. Tonight, she thinks she's still winning. Let her. The first thing I did was stop asking questions, because questions give away suspicion, and I wasn't interested in her explanations anymore, only in catching the lies before they left her mouth. She'd grown too confident, too careless in her deceit, thinking my silence was ignorance, not strategy. But I wasn't quiet because I was lost. I was quiet because I was already mapping the battlefield. The first move was data. I didn't follow her. I followed the digital trail she didn't even know she was leaving. I went through our shared cloud account, found that her phone was still backing up to it, something she must have forgotten when she upgraded. Every photo she took, every new contact, even app logins were timestamped and floating in my reach like fish swimming into a net. I created a duplicate account and let it drip feed me her secrets. There were no scandalous photos, she was too smart for that. But there were selfies taken in rooms I didn't recognize, on nights she said she was working late. One particularly telling image showed her sipping wine in front of a bar's neon sign with a visible time stamp during what was supposed to be a women's networking seminar. That gave me a name. Haven. I remembered the calendar alert from her iPad. From there, I checked our joint account history. She'd always handled our bills and spending because she liked feeling in control, but I'd always kept a passive eye on it, until now. A pattern emerged. Weekly cash withdrawals in uneven amounts, always on Thursdays. Tips, cab fares, or just untraceable money she didn't want tied to her. I cross-referenced those dates with her excuses. Spa night, book club, work training. Every time a lie. But I didn't stop there. I set up a new account on a dating app under a fake name and premium profile, one she used before we met, which I remembered because she had jokingly told me about the creepy DMs. I uploaded a professional-looking picture of a man I knew she'd find attractive, tall, well-dressed, foreign-looking. Then I swiped right on only one profile, hers. It didn't take long. Within 48 hours, she matched, messaged, and said she was in an emotionally complicated marriage with a man who doesn't listen. That was the first time I actually laughed out loud in weeks. I didn't reply. I just screenshot it and saved it to a hidden drive. Next, I turned my attention to her best friend, Rachel. They were practically inseparable lately, always posting vague, girl time captions with wine glasses and dim lighting. But Rachel was as transparent as glass. I invited Rachel's boyfriend out for drinks, played the role of curious, concerned husband, and casually asked if he and Rachel had ever gone on one of those girls-only weekends recently. He blinked. "What girls' weekends?" he asked. "Exactly." I planted a seed then. Told him I was thinking of surprising them on one of their wine nights. Let him mull on it. The next day, Rachel unfollowed me on Instagram. Guilty conscience or instruction. Either way, I had confirmation she was in on it, or at least covering it. Still, I stayed polite. I played the part of the loving, supportive husband. I cooked more, asked how her day went, even suggested we take a trip together, knowing full well she'd decline, and she did. "Things at work are intense right now," she said, biting her lip like it hurt to lie. I nodded and told her I understood. The next day, I sent a courier to her office with a bouquet and a card. "Just thinking about you. Love, M." Except I didn't sign it with my name. I used the same initial I'd seen in her calendar alert. I watched her reaction when she walked in the door that night. She was quiet, visibly off. I asked how work was. She said, "Fine, just busy." She didn't mention the flowers. I didn't press, just stored that little tremor of guilt in my growing file of evidence. Then I set one final trap. I told her I was heading out of town for a 2-day conference, some boring finance thing, nothing she'd be interested in. I even left early, suitcase packed, kissed her goodbye. I drove 15 minutes away, parked at a friend's place, and waited. The moment she thought I was gone, her mask slipped. She dressed like she hadn't in months, tight black jeans, makeup applied with deliberate care. I watched through the webcam I had hidden in the corner of our living room clock, a new gift I'd installed a week ago. She left at 7:12 p.m. I waited 10 minutes, then checked her location through the shared app we used when traveling, one she forgot to disable. She was at Haven. Again, I took screenshots, downloaded video clips, documented the timeline. No confrontation, no accusations. I was no longer chasing truth. I was building a case, a silent dossier of betrayal, curated with surgical precision. She still smiled at me every morning like she thought I was blind. But she didn't realize I'd already seen everything, and I wasn't going to stop her. Not yet. I needed her to dig deeper. I needed her to bury herself in the grave she didn't know I was digging. She didn't notice the photos at first, not when the waiter brought the wine or when I pulled out her chair at the rooftop restaurant she'd always wanted to try, the one with a view of the skyline and just enough ambient noise to keep secrets contained between sips of Pinot Noir. I let her talk, let her smile like everything was fine, like I wasn't watching her mouth shape words I already knew were lies. "It's really nice we're doing this," she said, her hand brushing mine. "Feels like we've been disconnected lately." I smiled and nodded, raising my glass in silent agreement. I wanted her comfortable. I wanted her to believe the illusion one last time. Then, as the dessert menu arrived, the screen behind the bar, normally filled with images of clinking glasses and happy couples, flickered and cut to a silent slideshow. I'd paid the manager extra for the time display, set to play exactly 90 seconds of curated stills with no sound, no fanfare, just truth. It started simple, her at the bar with him, laughing. Then his hand on her thigh. Then the two of them entering the hotel. Then, just before the final frame, a shot of her in the mirror, taking a selfie in the exact same earrings I had found weeks earlier. She froze. The color drained from her face as her eyes locked on the images behind me, her fork hanging in midair like she'd forgotten how gravity worked. "What is that?" she whispered, already knowing. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I watched her unravel from the front row. She blinked hard, shook her head, as if hoping the scene would change, but it didn't. I leaned in slightly, calm as still water, and said, "I just wanted you to see what I already know." She swallowed, jaw tightening, voice low and shaky. "It's not what you think." I didn't respond. I let the silence work for me, let it choke the air between us. She shifted in her seat, eyes darting around, trying to gauge if anyone else had noticed. No one had, not yet. We were just talking, she added, her tone rising just enough to sound defensive, but not enough to draw attention. It wasn't serious. It was a mistake. I tilted my head slightly, studying her like a specimen. You wore the earrings I gave you for him. That didn't feel like a mistake. Her breath caught. Then came the justification. You've been distant. You stopped paying attention to me. I felt invisible in our own home. I needed to feel wanted. She leaned forward like that made her case stronger. I didn't want this to happen. You scheduled it. I cut in, still calm, still even. The bar, the hotel, the weekends you told me were self-care. You planned it like a second life. Her face flushed, anger rising now that guilt wasn't winning. So what? You've been spying on me? Digging through my things like some paranoid creep? Her voice had a sharp edge now, drawing a glance from a nearby table. That's healthy. Not as healthy as screwing someone while lying to the man who would have taken a bullet for you, I said, still quiet, still measured. She flinched like I'd struck her, but I hadn't even raised my voice. You know what's sad? I continued. You rehearsed this whole defense in your head, didn't you? The denial, the excuses, the blame. But you never planned for silence. You never thought I'd stay calm. She tried to smile then, an ugly, mocking smirk that didn't reach her eyes. What? You gonna cry now? You think this makes you some tragic hero? She laughed once, hollow. Grow up. Relationships evolve. People change. I nodded slowly. Yes, they do. But not everyone erases the person beside them to feel new again. She opened her mouth to fire back, but nothing came out. Her fingers trembled slightly as she gripped her wine glass, and for the first time since this all began, I saw fear creep into her eyes. Not because she was caught, she'd been caught for weeks, but because she realized I hadn't just discovered the affair. I had studied it, let it unfold, documented it like a surgeon preparing for dissection, and she had no idea how far I was willing to go. What now? She whispered, eyes wide, voice cracked. I looked at her for a long moment, then glanced over my shoulder as the slideshow ended, replaced once again by the looping images of smiling couples clinking glasses. Now, I repeated, letting the word hang in the air like the drop before the executioner's axe. Now we finished dessert. I picked up the menu, calm, precise. She stared at me like I was speaking in tongues. Her world had cracked open, and I hadn't even touched her. Not yet. The moment we stepped outside the restaurant, she turned into something else entirely, like peeling the skin off a fruit and finding it rotten underneath. Her voice was sharp, biting, full of sudden, unfiltered venom. You know what your problem is? She hissed, heels clicking too fast on the pavement as she spun to face me under the dim yellow glow of a streetlight. You smothered me. You never let me breathe. Every single thing I did had to pass through your goddamn approval filter like I was some project you were managing. I didn't answer. I just watched her unravel, watched her mouth twist around words she thought would hurt me, hoping to strike anything soft that might still exist in me. You're so boring, she snapped, her voice rising. Safe. Predictable. You think being quiet and decent makes you some kind of martyr? I was dying inside that house. Dying next to you. And you didn't even notice. Still, I said nothing. Her eyes flicked around like she was looking for an exit that didn't exist, like she'd opened a door and found herself inside a room without walls. This wouldn't have happened if you were a real man, she spat. That one was meant to hit hard. I saw it in the way she squared her shoulders after saying it, like she expected a slap or a scream or at least a spark of rage. Instead, I simply looked at her, eyes steady, voice level. You gave yourself to someone else, and you still want to blame me for the decision you made. That froze her, just for a second. Then the fury came back, doubled. I made a mistake, she yelled. People make mistakes. But you just sat there like some sociopath, planning and watching instead of talking to me like a normal husband. I let the silence hang again. Let her hear the echo of her own hypocrisy in her voice. You weren't looking for a conversation, I said, finally. You were looking for permission. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked away. Then came the next shift. Her eyes softened, her posture slouched. I was lonely, she whispered. You think this was easy for me? Do you have any idea what it's like to feel invisible? Like I don't matter anymore. I watched the performance with the same detachment I'd reserved for a TV rerun. Then you should have left, I said. Instead of pretending. Instead of letting me build a life with a woman who was already gone. She stepped closer now, desperate. So that's it. You're just done? You don't even care what led me to that point. I gave a half shrug. You led yourself there. Step by step. Her hands balled into fists. You're so cold, she said, teeth clenched. What happened to you? You, I replied. You happened. That stopped her again. Her expression shifted, not with guilt, but with fear. Real fear. The kind that doesn't come from being caught, but from realizing the person you thought you controlled is no longer responding. You don't love me anymore, she said, like it had just occurred to her. I didn't blink. No, her voice cracked. But we have history. Memories. We've built everything together, and you set fire to it. I cut in. Don't cry about the ashes. She started pacing, hands in her hair, shaking her head. You can't just shut off. Nobody just shuts off. You're not this heartless. I'm not, I said. You just exhausted every part of me that cared. She laughed bitterly then, but it cracked halfway out. God, you really think you're the victim here? Like you didn't fail me in every quiet way that counts. I stepped toward her slowly, voice soft but absolute. You know what's worse than being betrayed? I said. Being loyal to someone who made you feel like loyalty was weakness. Her breath caught. Her lip quivered. She looked around like she didn't recognize the street anymore, like she didn't recognize me. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice suddenly small. What happens now? I looked at her for a long time, letting her stew in the silence she had no idea how to navigate. Nothing tonight, I said. Not because I don't have a plan, but because I want you to sit with this. To sit with the fact that I'm not screaming, or crying, or begging. I'm just done, and you don't know what I'm going to do next. That's going to eat at you more than anything else. She tried to reply, but no words came. Just a single, trembling exhale. I turned my back to her and walked away, not fast, not dramatically, just far enough to make sure she knew she was no longer worth chasing. And she stood there, alone, drowning in everything she thought she controlled, finally realizing she wasn't holding the leash anymore. She was wearing it. The day after the confrontation, I didn't sleep in or sit around mourning what was already dead. I started moving. Not loudly, not with rage or theatrics, but with quiet, surgical precision. She still thought she had time, that we were in some post-shock limbo where she might talk her way back into favor or cry just enough to make me second-guess myself. She didn't know that while she was sleeping off her anxiety in the guest room, I was laying out her reckoning piece by piece like a general mapping out a siege. First, I gathered everything. Screenshots of messages, calendar entries, GPS data, her dating app profile, bank statements, even audio snippets from the microphone I'd hidden in our bedroom lamp once things started to feel off. Not for drama, for documentation. Because evidence isn't revenge, it's a scalpel. I organized it into a file on a password-protected drive titled with a random string of numbers, so plain it would never catch her eye if she got curious. Then I made copies. One to my lawyer, one to a secure cloud, one on a flash drive hidden in my gym bag. The next step was the finances. We shared 3 accounts, 2 for household bills and 1 savings. I'd already set up a new account in my name and quietly moved my paycheck deposit over 2 weeks prior. Now I waited until she left for her fake therapy brunch and transferred my half from the savings, emptied the joint checking down to the dollar, and removed myself from every automatic payment. The car, mine, paid off, was in both our names. I visited the DMV, showed proof of purchase and maintenance records under my name, and filed the form to have her name removed. I also suspended her authorized user status from my credit cards and canceled the ones we opened together. She'd feel the sting not when she opened her wallet, but when the card declined for something small, petty, even a coffee or a rideshare. Confusion would turn to dread before she even texted me. I didn't reply. That same afternoon, I met with my lawyer. We had prepared divorce papers months ago, just in case. Now, I gave the green light. No warning, no discussion. The filing was clean, efficient, and damning. It requested a split based on irreconcilable differences, backed by documented infidelity. Her rights to alimony? Waived by her own affair. I wasn't interested in bleeding her dry. I just wanted her to watch everything she thought was hers slide out from under her feet while she tried to balance the lies. But the financial blow was only phase 1. The real pain would come from exposure. Not public shaming, no Facebook rants, no revenge posts, no shouting at her family. Just cold, quiet information. I emailed her parents, attaching a folder of labeled screenshots and a single sentence. I thought you deserved to know what your daughter's been up to. I didn't editorialize. Let the images speak. Her father replied with a single word, understood. Her mother never responded. Next, her job. She worked for a mid-sized firm with strict HR ethics policies. I didn't contact them directly. That would have been messy. Instead, I created an anonymous email using a burner account and sent a concise message to her boss. You may want to review your employee's recent conduct. It could compromise company representation. I attached a blurred photo of her kissing her lover at a networking event she claimed was strictly professional. I don't know what happened in that office after, but I saw her come home early 2 days later, face pale, hands trembling. She didn't say a word, just sat in the kitchen staring at nothing for hours. That same week, I transferred utilities into my name only, changed the Netflix password, revoked her Apple ID access from all shared devices, and disconnected the smart home app from her phone. It was petty, sure, but precision demands control. She still had her phone, her keys, and whatever dignity she could cling to. But every time she tried to do something that used to be effortless, she'd feel the distance growing between who she was and what she was losing. I let her sit in that quiet decay, never telling her what I was doing next. When the divorce papers arrived at the house, delivered while she was home alone, she called me 13 times in an hour. I didn't answer. I let her voicemails pile up. Confusion, then rage, then desperation, until the last one was just silence and breathing. She still thought I might reconsider, that this was just some Cold War she could outlast. She didn't know the war was already over. I had raised her foundation and walked away without a scratch. Everything she thought she was holding on to, her image, her comfort, her narrative, was gone. And she never saw the blade, because I never lifted it. I just let her hands keep pulling the rope that was already wrapped around her throat. It happened at her sister's engagement party, a beautiful, manicured event filled with glowing lights, tasteful music, and the kind of curated perfection that made people believe in fairy tales. She had begged me to go with her, said it would mean a lot to the family if we showed up, united, her eyes searching mine with desperate hope disguised as casual optimism. I agreed without hesitation, watched her breathe a quiet sigh of relief like she still believed the show could go on. I wore the same suit I wore the day I proposed, not because it meant anything to me anymore, but because I knew she remembered every detail of that day, and I wanted her to choke on the comparison. We walked in together, arm in arm, her smile practiced, her steps calculated, like she was trying to project the image of a woman who still had everything under control. But the cracks had already started before the first toast. Her father greeted me with a handshake and didn't even look at her. Her mother offered a stiff smile and turned away. Her sister, the bride-to-be, hugged me long and hard, whispering, "Thank you for coming," before nodding curtly at her and disappearing into the crowd. That was the first tremor. She laughed it off, clinging to her wine glass like it could ground her, making small talk with a couple from her office, until the man's wife glanced at her, then at me, and subtly moved closer to her husband. The whispers started soon after, soft as falling ash but unmistakable in their shape. A cousin murmuring into a drink. A friend of the family scrolling something on her phone and glancing up, expression twisted in quiet judgment. Every conversation paused a beat when she entered the circle, then picked up again without inviting her in. Her lover hadn't shown. Of course not. After the email I sent him, with every time-stamped photo, every quote, every receipt, he had gone radio silent. She tried texting him once that night, pretending she was just checking notifications, but I saw the panic flicker across her face when no reply came. That was tremor number 2. By the time the toasts began, she was visibly unraveling, smiling too hard, laughing too loud, overcompensating with every sip of champagne. And then it happened. Her best friend Rachel, dressed in a sleek green dress, stepped up to the mic to make her toast. "I'd like to raise a glass," she said sweetly, "to loyalty, because without it, all the pretty words in the world mean nothing." There was a pause, short and sharp. Then she turned to face us directly. "And to the people who know how to be loyal, even when the person they love doesn't deserve it." The entire room turned toward our table, toward her. Her hand froze on the stem of her glass. The smile broke, just a twitch at first, then a full collapse as her mouth flattened into a straight line, I scanning the crowd for a lifeline that wasn't there. She stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice loud, trembling. "You're all acting like I murdered someone." No one responded. No one had to. Her father crossed his arms. Her mother looked at the floor. Rachel stepped down from the stage without looking back. That was the third tremor, and it shook the room. "You're all judging me," she said, voice cracking now, eyes wild, scanning every face that wouldn't meet hers. "You don't know what it was like. You don't know what I went through. I was alone in that marriage." Still silence. The kind of silence that doesn't forgive. She turned to me, hands outstretched like she was drowning and only just realizing there was no shore. "Say something," she pleaded. "Tell them it's not what they think." I looked at her, calm, collected, perfectly still. And I said nothing. Because she didn't deserve my voice anymore. She deserved the silence she forced me to live in for months while she handed pieces of herself to someone else. She took a step closer, lower now, almost a whisper. "Please. You love me. You always loved me." My expression didn't change. I just watched her, watched the mascara start to bleed into the corners of her eyes, watched her lips tremble as the weight of it all finally crashed down on her shoulders. She looked around one last time, desperate for someone to save her. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence became unbearable, pressing against her like 1,000 walls. She tried to laugh. "This is a joke. You're all ridiculous." But the laugh came out broken, more like a sob. Her hand flew to her mouth as if she could hold the collapse inside. She backed away slowly, bumping into chairs, knocking over a glass. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. "I didn't mean, but nobody cared anymore." She wasn't the victim. She wasn't the sinner. She was just a woman who thought she could dance in fire without getting burned. And I stood there, unmoved, the one man in the room who had every reason to hate her, but didn't need to lift a finger. I watched her fall apart, and she saw me watching. That was what broke her. Not the exposure. Not the judgment. Me. Just standing there, calm and silent, like justice incarnate. It happened 3 days after the engagement party, at her cousin's graduation gathering, another meticulously planned event filled with catered smiles and people pretending they didn't know what had just exploded in our lives. But they did. Everyone did. The whispers were louder this time. The glances longer. And yet, she still walked in like the star of the show, wearing that fake confidence like it hadn't cracked and splintered in front of an entire family just nights before. I was already there, sitting in the far corner talking to her father, who, for the first time since I met him, spoke to me like a man instead of a son-in-law. He knew everything now, and he made no effort to shield her from the weight of her own consequences. The moment she walked in and saw me, her entire posture tensed, like a cornered animal unsure whether to run or fight. I stood, nodded to her father, and walked toward her. People stepped back. Conversations hushed. A circle began forming, subtle but instinctive, because everyone felt it coming. She tried to smile. "Can we not do this here?" she said quietly, scanning the growing audience. "Too late," I said. Then, louder, clear enough for every nearby pair of ears to catch, "You dragged it here with every lie you told while holding my hand." Her face tightened. "This isn't the place." "No," I cut her off. "The place was our home. The place was our bed. The place was every dinner you smiled through while messaging him under the table." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Her mother stood frozen, hand on her chest. Her cousin, the graduate, stepped back with wide eyes. "Stop it," she hissed, stepping closer. "You want to humiliate me? Go ahead. You already did it once. You win, okay? You win." "This wasn't a game," I snapped. "But you treated it like one. You had the board. You had the pieces. You played both sides. And now you don't like the ending." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You were never there. You were a ghost. You think being silent makes you noble? It made me feel dead. Then you should have left." I roared, voice finally cracking with everything I'd buried. "But you didn't. You stayed. You used me as your shield while you fed pieces of yourself to someone else like I'd never noticed the hollow growing between us." Someone tried to step in, her aunt maybe, but her father held up a hand and said, "Let them finish." She took a deep breath, eyes glistening, then turned cold again. "I made one mistake." I laughed, sharp and joyless. "No, a mistake is a misstep. What you did was a campaign. You lied. Repeatedly. You gaslight me into thinking I was paranoid. You told him you loved him while coming home to me. He meant nothing," she screamed. "I didn't even love him." "Then you betrayed me for nothing," I replied, and that landed harder than any shout. Her mouth fell open, but nothing came out. Around us, the room was dead silent. Her coworker whispered something to the woman next to her. Someone else had pulled out their phone, filming quietly behind a potted plant. "You made me feel worthless," she said suddenly, voice trembling, not in rage now, but desperation. "You never touched me like you used to. You stopped complimenting me. I felt invisible, like I was fading into furniture. Because I thought you were tired," I said, voice calm now, but every word sharp as glass. "I gave you space because you said you needed time to grow. I didn't know you meant growing into someone I wouldn't recognize. Someone who looks me in the eye and tells me she's just going to yoga while she's wrapping her arms around another man in a hotel bar." The room held its breath. Then, from behind the crowd, a voice cut through. "That's not what she told me." And there he was, the affair partner, standing near the drinks table, his face ghost white, realizing he'd been outed and cornered in the same moment. She spun, furious. "What are you doing here?" "You invited me," he said. "Last week. Before all of this." He looked at me, then back at her. "You told me you were leaving him. That he was abusive." Another gasp. "You liar," she whispered. "You swore you wouldn't." "I didn't know he had proof," he replied, stepping back. "I thought you were just unhappy. I didn't sign up for this." "Coward," she hissed. "Every man in my life is a coward." "No," I said. "Every man in your life finally sees you for who you are. And you hate it because you built everything around pretending you were the victim." She screamed then, a raw, wordless sound, shoving past her own mother, knocking over a chair. "You ruined everything." "No," I said, voice low now. "You did. I just brought the receipts." And with that, I turned my back on her, walked through the crowd that parted like waves, and left her standing there, shaking, sobbing, mascara running, surrounded by people who once loved her, now staring like they didn't know who they were looking at anymore. She lost the job first. HR didn't say it publicly, of course, but it wasn't hard to guess why her name disappeared from the company's Our Team page less than a week after the engagement party incident. Word had spread. Corporate didn't want the scandal tied to their brand, and they definitely didn't want a woman whose moral compass had cracked in such a public, humiliating fashion. Her colleagues stopped replying to her messages, and her inbox, once filled with praise and collaboration, was suddenly nothing but spam and silence. Then came the social unraveling. Friends who used to flood her posts with hearts and emojis quietly unfollowed. Group chats dried up. She posted a selfie 2 weeks after the fallout, clearly an attempt to look happy and moving on, and got exactly 2 likes. Her name, once mentioned with respect at social gatherings, now brought awkward glances and hushed exchanges. People didn't confront her. They just avoided her, crossed the street when they saw her coming, looked away when she walked into the local cafe she used to adore. Her parents didn't disown her, not officially, but their silence spoke louder than any ultimatum. Her father refused to pick up her calls. Her mother offered cold one-word texts and zero comfort. The cousins she'd grown up with cut contact entirely, blocking her on every platform. Even Rachel, the best friend who once helped her cover her tracks, refused to answer the door when she knocked at her apartment one rainy evening. And as for him, the affair partner, he vanished the moment her life stopped being convenient. She texted him, called, begged. Nothing. The last message he sent was 2 words, "Don't contact." With the walls caving in, she tried to reinvent herself, moved to a smaller town 2 hours away, took a job at a struggling boutique that didn't ask too many questions. She lived in a crumbling 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, far removed from the house we once shared, the career she once celebrated, the friends who once adored her. She never posted pictures of the new place. She didn't post at all, but she watched. I know she did. I could see her name at the bottom of my story views, watching my life move on without her. Watching me rebuild from the rubble she left behind, stronger, quieter, and completely untouched by her absence. Then came the message, simple, desperate, "I still love you." I never stopped. I was stupid. I miss everything. I miss you. Please, just talk to me. I read it once. Deleted it. She sent another. "I'll come by tomorrow. I just want to see you, just once." I didn't reply, but I left the porch light on. She showed up just after dark, standing there in the same coat she used to wear when we'd walk together in winter, except now it didn't look cozy, it looked empty. Her eyes were swollen, makeup smeared, voice raw. "I know I don't deserve anything," she said, "but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. I destroyed the best thing in my life." I hurt the one person who would have done anything for me. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I'd take it all back if I could. I looked at her then, not the way I used to, not with anger or grief, but with the kind of cold detachment you reserve for someone you passed in a dream and forgot by morning. I don't even know who you are, I said, each word landing like iron dropped from the sky. Her breath caught. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say more, but what do you say to someone who finally sees through you entirely? She stood there for a moment longer, trembling, then turned and walked down the steps into the darkness she had chosen the moment she betrayed me. She never came back. She never wrote again. And if she did, I never saw it. Because I had stopped looking. That's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't just kill love. It rewrites every memory, every kiss, every promise. And in the end, all that's left is a ghost standing on your doorstep, begging for a version of you that died the moment she stopped being worthy of it. Thank you for listening to my story. Now tell me, where are you listening from? And did this story hit the way you expected it to?